The murmurs started low, like the hum of distant rain on a tin roof. They grew sharper, edged with scorn, as whispers curled through the air of the cramped community center lobby. An elderly woman sat alone on a wooden bench, her hands clasped tightly over the frayed cuffs of a faded blue coat. It draped over her thin frame, worn and weathered, the fabric carrying the weight of years. A group of young volunteers, crisp in their matching red vests, exchanged glances. One, a lanky boy with a fresh haircut, muttered to his friend, "Looks like she pulled that thing out of an attic trunk." Their laughter spilled out, sharp and careless. The woman didn't flinch. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor, steady, unyielding. But someone noticed. At the edge of the room, a retired colonel, his posture rigid despite his age, froze mid-stride. His eyes caught the faded patch on her sleeve, and his breath hitched. In that moment, the air shifted. Her name was Marion Vell. She was nearing 70, her days spent quietly tending a small herb garden behind a rented cottage on the outskirts of Willow Creek. She kept to herself, offering little to the neighbor who nodded in passing, the pharmacist who filled her prescriptions, or the young barista who sometimes helped with her grocery bags. To them, she was just an old woman, unremarkable. Her life a closed book. Yet every Saturday, without fail, Marion boarded the 10:15 a.m. bus to the community center. She'd sit in the same corner, silent, her coat always on. The coat was threadbare, navy canvas with a missing button near the wrist. On its sleeve, a worn patch bore a faint emblem, a hawk clutching a star with the letters CVT stitched below. Most ignored it. Most, but not all. The volunteers saw her as a relic, out of place among their bustling energy. One, a brash kid named Tobin, decided to make her the day's entertainment. He strolled over, his grin dripping with false charm. "Ma'am," he said, voice laced with mockery, "this place is for event staff and guests. You sure you're in the right spot?" Marion said nothing, her hands still folded. Tobin smirked wider. "That coat wouldn't pass muster at a yard sale." A few others snickered, their dismissal almost tangible, a shared verdict that she was irrelevant, her story long faded, unworthy of curiosity. Then, boots clicked sharply on the tile. The colonel, gray-haired with a chest heavy with service ribbons, stepped forward. His eyes never left the coat. "Where did you get that?" His voice sliced through the chatter. Tobin blinked, caught off guard. "Sir?" The colonel's tone softened, not with anger but with something deeper. Reverence. The room stilled. Marion lifted her head, her eyes sharp despite their age, meeting his. "You were CVT?" he asked, almost a whisper. She nodded, just once. The colonel, a man who'd faced chaos without blinking, took a step back. "Clear the room." The colonel's voice was low, unyielding, cutting through the lingering snickers like a blade through fog. Tobin hesitated, his bravado faltering. "Sir, Now!" the colonel snapped, his tone leaving no space for argument. The volunteers scattered, their red vests a blur as they shuffled out of the lobby, leaving only the hum of the overhead lights. Marion Vell remained seated, her hands still gripping the edges of her faded blue coat, its hawk and star patch catching the dim glow. The colonel approached, his steps deliberate, as if nearing something sacred. He lowered himself onto the bench beside her, not as a superior, but as a man in the presence of a legend. "They said your unit didn't make it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "that the whole CVT team was lost in '82. Marion's gaze drifted to the window, where the morning light spilled over the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Her voice, when it came, was soft, like the crackle of embers long thought extinguished. "We weren't lost," she said. "We were erased." The colonel leaned closer, his metals glinting faintly, his eyes searching hers for the story she'd carried in silence. She spoke, halting at first, then steady, her words weaving a past no one in that room could have imagined. Operation Crescent Vanguard, she called it. A covert mission, deep behind enemy lines, where she'd been the only woman in a unit of shadow operatives. Marion had been dropped into hostile territory with nothing but her training and a radio. She'd relayed coordinates that turned the tide of a grueling standoff, saving countless lives. Captured, she'd endured 16 months in a makeshift prison, her survival assumed impossible. When she was finally traded back, her name was scrubbed from every record, for operational security. The coat with its CVT patch was all that remained of her service, a relic she wore like armor. The colonel listened, his face etched with lines deepened by years of war, his eyes glistening with something rare: grief, respect, awe. "Why didn't you speak up?" he asked, his voice thick. Marion's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "I tried. No one cared to hear." She paused, her fingers brushing the frayed patch. "So I stopped." He rose, his posture snapping to attention, and saluted her, not out of protocol, but out of a debt too vast for words. "You were a shadow in our records," he said, "but you're a titan in our history." Outside, the wind stirred the leaves of Willow Creek's ancient oaks, and the lobby remained empty, save for the two of them. Marion's silence wasn't weakness, but a vault holding a story too heavy for most to carry. The colonel understood. He'd seen war, but she'd lived its hidden edges, her valor stitched into the seams of a coat no one thought to notice. Until now. The following Saturday, Marion Vell stepped off the 10:15 a.m. bus, her faded blue coat draped over her shoulders as always. The air in Willow Creek carried the faint scent of rain-soaked earth, and the community center loomed ahead, its glass doors catching the morning sun. She braced herself for the usual: whispers, sidelong glances, the weight of being unseen. But today was different. As she approached, the doors swung open, and a line of young volunteers stood waiting, their red vests crisp, their faces solemn. At the center was Tobin, the boy who'd mocked her, now holding a small bundle of wildflowers and a neatly folded flag. His hands shook slightly, his eyes fixed on the ground. No one laughed, no one smirked. The lobby, usually a churn of noise and motion, was still, the air thick with something new: respect. Behind the volunteers, a framed photograph hung on the wall, its wooden edges polished to a shine. It showed a younger Marion, her face fierce and focused, her hair pulled back under a cap, the same hawk and star patch vivid on her sleeve. Below it, a brass plaque gleamed. Marion Vell, Operation Crescent Vanguard, courage without echo, honor beyond record. Marianne paused, her breath catching as she read the words. Her eyes flicked to the volunteers, then back to the plaque. Tobin stepped forward, his voice unsteady but earnest. "We didn't know," he said, offering the flowers. "We're sorry." The others stood straighter, their silence a collective apology for the dismissal, the laughter, the years she'd been invisible. Marion took the flowers, her fingers brushing the delicate petals, and a quiet smile broke across her face, not wide, but real, like sunlight through a crack in stone. She didn't speak of the past again that day. She didn't need to. The photograph, the plaque, the flag in her hands, they spoke for her. Some heroes wear their stories in medals pinned to their chests. Others carry them in the threads of a worn coat, in the lines of a face the world overlooked. Marion's story lived in the patch she'd never discarded, in the silence she'd borne with unbroken strength. One man had seen it. One moment had changed everything, and as she stood there, surrounded by those who now saw her, the weight of decades seemed to lift, just a little. If her story stirs something in you, don't let it fade. Share it. Speak of it. Let the quiet giants among us be known. Let their courage